This is a video about Wire. It will be a primer of 20 songs, which will try and introduce you to the band and maybe tell the story of the band. Let's go.
There are 4 members of Wire. They are Graham Lewis, Bruce Gilbert, Colin Newman, Robert Gotobed. It's the same people, but not necessarily the same music.
Hi, Darren here. Yes, we'll be talking about kind of the first half of the band's career here. So this is up to the turn of the millennium. This is not one of those kind of pseudo documentary type videos. I'd rather stay focused on the songs, stay focused on the music, and we'll tell the story of the band via the songs. So let's get straight into it with 5 tracks from their debut album, Pink Flag, from 1977. And the first track is probably, the most punk track that you could pick. That's 12XU. This is a perfect example of how early Wire were trading using the punk language, the punk vocabulary, but doing something a little different. It's very short, it's very funny. The band were fans of the Ramones. They had a big influence on them when they saw them in London in the 70s. And 12XU is, according to the band, a no chord song. The main verse doesn't really feature a chord as such, just this kind of chugging rhythm with the lyrics over it. It very famously as well features that self-censoring chorus of 12XU. Very reminiscent of Chic, I guess. If you're aware of their track Freak Out, they were actually saying something far worse, beginning with F and O. But yeah, it's very minimal, very funny, very short. I saw you in a mag kissing a man. The strange thing about this punk track, which isn't really a punk track, is the influence it had, I think, on the US punk scene, on the US hardcore scene in particular. Minor Threat covered this song. This whole album was a huge influence on a number of, very big figures in the US punk hardcore scene. The Minutemen, Henry Rollins. Yeah, and for my second track, I'm choosing Ex Lion Tamer, which again is another of these kind of punk adjacent songs, which carries a lot of the same baggage as punk, but does something just oddly different that you find hard to put your finger on. The playing is less kind of hairy and thrashy. It's very tight, very controlled. And despite having kind of what you could call a kind of a trad kind of chord sequence, the lyrics, I think, are where the songs like this get really interesting. There's a very strange meter, very strange kind of rhythm to the words, the way they fit into the songs. And this is primarily, I think, because most of the lyrics were written by Graham Lewis, the bass player, who then handed them to Colin Newman, who would write the music. So there's this feeling of fitting a text to music. There's some very, very kind of Brit-centric lyrics in here. Lines like, fish fingers all in a line. And again, that weird rhythm where he sings, stay tuned to your TV set. It just sounds odd. Punk adjacent, I think, would cover it. Third up, I've got The Lowdown. And I think this one shows the genesis, I think, of Wire's early songwriting methods. This one was actually the very first lyric that Graham Lewis gave to Colin Newman, just after they'd slimmed down from a 5-piece to a 4-piece. They were a 5-piece band called Overload. And they ditched their leader, that was George Gill, because they weren't terribly happy. And he'd been in hospital for a while. So they reconvened as a 4-piece and had to work things out. This was the first, I think, of the fruits of that kind of slimming down to a 4-piece. The band were knocked out by it. It's very odd in terms of there's no histrionics. It's much slower than most punk. They did like to wind up punk audiences by either playing songs very fast, they were over before they could get going, or playing really slow ones. And this is one of the slower ones. It's this kind of sharp, trap closing kind of rhythm guitar. And it also features this huge pause where everything drops out and Colin Newman sings, "That's the lowdown." I think it might be the birth of that stop-start, loud-quiet dynamic. Fourth, I've chosen Reuters. This is actually the opening track to the album. So if you were listening to it in 1977 for the first time, you would have immediately had this huge signpost telling you that this was not punk as we know it. It's very moody, very droning, almost a slow motion 2-chord kind of swing, very kind of relentless churning, lots of disturbing imagery, looting, burning, rape, and they kind of twist the song into kind of a very pretty coda as it kind of winds down. But the one word they're singing through that entire section is rape. It is very, very disconcerting and absolutely classic Wire. And for my fifth selection, I've chosen Three Girl Rumba. And yeah, I think this highlights again this idea of words being written and fitted to music. The band had this kind of concept called the text. The idea was that when the text stops, the music stops. This is the reason why they had so many very kind of abrupt endings, very short songs. And Three Girl Rumba is a perfect example of that. It's got this kind of jabbing, ping-ponging riff. They're singing Go Under, Go Under, and Think of a Number, very abstract, kind of Dadaist almost lyrics that resolve into this, big musical climax, leaving you absolutely none the wiser. So we'll leave Pink Flag and move on to the next studio release of theirs, which would be Chairs Missing. But before we do, I'm going to pop a link up there. You can either go check that now or later at your own leisure. Yeah, they did release a single between Pink Flag and Chairs Missing, which was Dot Dash. That has a very interesting story behind it, and I've made an entirely separate video about that. So 5 tracks again, but this time from Chairs Missing. So the 6th entry on my list of 20 is Another the Letter. And for this one, I think you could consider it a companion piece of sorts to the previous song, to Three Girl Rumba. It's over in about 1 minute and 8 seconds. This kind of rattling delivery, a babbling lyric. It seems like it's in double quick time and ends even more abruptly. The difference here, I think, is you can hear they're playing around in the studio more. This one has keyboards. It has this maddening little riff running through the whole thing, this synth riff. The band were evolving before your eyes with a track like this, with their then producer of this album, Pink Flag, and the next album, Mike Thorne, kind of encouraging them. And 7th up, I've got Practice Makes Perfect. And I think this is Wire's first big creative leap in a songwriting and a compositional sense. It features these very sharp, stabbing guitars, this kind of spacey, almost dubby kind of offbeat rimshot drumming. Yeah, each member you can hear locking into something, and Graham Lewis's bass is heavily affected, and there's these spidery little kind of Bruce Gilbert solo lines. And yeah, all the way through it, that kind of maddening synth klaxon rising and then falling away into the background. Spooky background vocals, this reverbed laughing, giving way to this kind of almost choral ending. It sounds like a Gregorian chant. It is quite the thing. And in fact, that was the thing. When the band knew that they'd done something, Bruce Gilbert had this question he would always ask them. It's just like, what happened? Did something happen? And in the case of this track, something definitely did happen. The first time Colin Newman played it and his band members just instinctively kicked in, it came together very, very quickly. Yeah, this is a big step in the evolution of Wire. On my 8th track is French film Blurred. And I think this picks up that very same creative pattern. Again, you get the lyrics and the music meshing in very, unexpected ways. And the song kind of starts to coalesce and around these kind of colliding, kind of smeared, heavily processed guitar lines towards the song's collapse. It seems to be about trying to watch a French film on a TV set with very poor reception and being unable to kind of make sense of it because you don't understand this second language. Yeah, you get the first kind of appearance of this kind of the idea of like a circular melody, which kind of builds through the song, and of the song telling a vague kind of story structure, I think, in French film Blurred. And while I'm talking about, that heavily processed, guitar thing that was going on in a track like this, I think it's worth pointing out that around about this time, this is one for the guitar nerds, around about 75 through to about 78, 79, there were big steps in guitar effects technology. Some very big, very influential effects that a lot of people were using came out in this period. And Mike Thorne was the guy who made a trip to New York and came back with a bunch of these, really changed up Wire's sound. I'm talking effects like the Electro Harmonix Deluxe Memory Man, the delay pedal, the Boss CE1 chorus, and the MXR flanger, which was one of the ones that Mike gave to the bass player Graham Lewis. At number 9, I've got Marooned. I think as you could kind of see the punk kind of tide receding around Wire's ankles, it revealed in songs like this one, in Marooned, a very kind of unexpected influence, I think. And and Colin Newman has talked about this, the idea of late 60s psychedelic pop, very beloved of Colin. He was very affected by the Beatles. And I think this song, does capture that kind of slightly atmospheric, downbeat kind of psychedelic, bordering on prog, kind of Pink Floyd kind of mood. And I think the band, several other members of the band, were equally influenced by some of the music of this period, that Brit psych period. Bands like Barrett era, Pink Floyd, King Crimson even, The Move, The Pretty Things, that kind of thing. And the 10th song on the list, and the final one I'm selecting from Chairs Missing. This is the song that nearly put Wire on top of the pops. It's Outdoor Miner. A beautiful, sweet, short but sweet pop song. In fact, that feature of the text, the text being short so the song ended, that kind of caught up with Wire here and with EMI. They wanted to release it as a single, but it was too short for a single release. It only clocks in at 1 minute 45 seconds. They had to kind of repeat verse and chorus and add in a piano solo that Mike Thorne recorded for them to get it over that kind of 2.5 minute mark. Just impossibly pretty, chiming kind of chorus, rhythm guitar, and a big sing-along chorus. He lies on his side. Is he trying to hide? In fact, it's the earth, which he's known since birth. This was Wire doing pop. And this is quite a compressed time frame here. Pink Flag, 77, Chairs Missing, 78, and then their third album, 154, 1979. And I think this is the point where Wire kind of consolidated that huge creative leap they'd taken going from Pink Flag to Chairs Missing and pushed it a little further. So 4 tracks from 154 here, starting with at number 11, Two People in a Room. And again, the continuation of that idea that the text defined the song, the short, sharp songs, but it's much edgier, much more jarring. The lyrics here kind of really get strained and push it into this very aggressive kind of panic territory. Colin Newman is singing, "My God, they're so gifted." This packs an awful lot into just over 2 minutes. And I think this kind of shows a darker Wire. And at the same time, a more accomplished Wire. They got very tight. They'd been road tested by this point. They'd done a big tour as main support for Roxy Music in this year. And I think even the producer, Mike Thorne, he could see how much they'd progressed as musicians. And my 12th selection is The Other Window. And I think this is one that really showcases this album, 154, as a 1979 album. That sound, it's fractured, it's moody, it's full of affected guitars, very dark kind of studio ambience. The synths seem thicker, more integrated into the band's sound than they ever had done. I think this really prefigures a lot of what we might describe as goth within, the next couple of years. That kind of cold, icy, detached, very European feel. And in The Other Window, Bruce Gilbert takes the spoken kind of lead lyric here. And the song, fractured is the best word to describe it, musically and lyrically. It's got very odd bursts of, that operatic choral style singing, this relentless pounding beat, these shards of treated cut up guitar. Very kind of disturbing, arresting imagery, just like, art rock coolness personified. And at 13, I've selected Blessed State. Despite all that darkness, the prettiness was still there. The outdoor miner kind of side, it can still be pulled out. And on Blessed State, you get this kind of chiming, spiraling set of guitar melodies. They seem to coil around, Graham Lewis's vocal. It's the first lead vocal of his I've talked about here, but it patiently builds up. You get these new layers of guitar kind of landing and interlocking perfectly. It's got a very kind of almost a blissful kind of Eno-esque feel to this one. And the band just seemed to kind of fold in around this melody perfectly. And number 14, I've selected On Returning. I think this is kind of 154's version of Practice Makes Perfect, to my ears at least. It has the same feel of things just interlocking and clicking perfectly. Each part is distinct. You get this very menacing kind of synth pattern and these very choppy affected guitars, the bass nudging the song along until you get these kind of malfunctioning electronic noises. The synths swamp the song for its finale. Newman sings An Evening of Fun in the Metropolis of Your Dreams, and it just gets repeated and repeated and reverbed through to the song's fade. If you were going to pick one song, if you were going to try and represent 154 in microcosm, I think this would be a great example. And as I said, 1979, I think On Returning, this track really captures something of the zeitgeist, that kind of weird balladian, J.G. Ballard, that unease of his that contemporaries like Joy Division were exploring. Projecting into the future, this song to me sounds like a template for much of The Cure's early work. I know Robert Smith was a huge fan, and I can hear a lot of, for instance, a song like Primary from their Faith album in On Returning. Jumping forward in time a little now to 1986, as the band did kind of take a break from each other. But at number 15, I've got Drill. Yeah, this is from their 1986 Snake Drill EP, which was released on Mute Records, the new label. Wow, so what is Drill? Well, simply put, I guess it's a one-chord song based around a very specific single rhythm played on the bass drum and the hi-hat only, which the band christened the Dugga Dugga Dugga. Yeah, there is a tiny melody in there that surfaces occasionally, but that's your lot, Is it even fully a song? It feels kind of like an exercise, some kind of template for something else, a paradigm. Why is that? Well, the band, they can play it short or they can stretch it out live for up to 30 minutes plus. The track is so malleable that they recorded an entire LP of variants of drill, different takes on drill, and they played it many times at their own festivals, which also took the name Drill, with many other guest musicians. They've played it with St. Vincent, they've played it with Swans. And rather memorably, they played it on The Late Show on US TV in 1987 to an extremely confused TV audience. I do urge you to go and find the YouTube footage of that. It's quite something. Yeah, a lot of people find drill hard work, but it's such a big part of their evolution as a band and the way they were going that I can't have a wire primer without having drill. Number 16, next up on my list, I've got Ahead, which is from their 1987 album, The Ideal Copy. Yeah, things weren't all rosy, really, from a band perspective when they got back together. It had been a 4 or 5 year hiatus since about 1980 when they'd split. And trying to record in Berlin, just using their standard procedure, the way that they worked, they kind of hit a wall. They weren't getting anywhere. They wasted a month. So producer Gareth Jones, having just got some new gear in, he got a Steinberg sequencer. He basically locked them in a room and said, try and do something with this, see what you do. And by the end of the day, they had the bass line for Ahead. They'd programmed it, they'd worked through it, and it was the end of that creative block. They found a new way to write stuff, to get to grips with what was kind of the 80s cutting edge music production technology. Yeah, Ahead is this kind of soaring, thrilling, propulsive, glide of a song. There's kind of a rattling guitar motif at the center of it, but it's awash with these kind of synthesized choral backing vocals. Yeah, I think this kind of sound is something that would shape this phase of the band over the next 4 or 5 years. And 17th on my list, I've got Kidney Bingos. Yeah, probably their purest out-and-out pop song since Outdoor Miner or the Map Reference single from 154. Yeah, it manages to eclipse both of those songs, in my opinion, and it's probably my favourite single by any alternative act of the late 1980s. Yeah, it's got a kind of a fractured, cut-up lyric of newspaper headlines and tabloid speak of the time. These beautifully economical chiming guitar chords meshing perfectly with, the technology that they'd struggled with so much to get through Ahead. Yeah, money, spines, paper lung, kidney bingos, organ fun. I think Newman's very calm vocal approach here brushes up against, this kind of quite disturbing, abstract, Dadaist conceit perfectly. Yeah, and that kind of final vocal melody added by Graham Lewis towards the song's coda is just the icing on the cake. For me, this is just a perfect song. And at 18, from the same album as Kidney Bingos, which was A Bell as a Cup Until It Struck, I've got The Boiling Boy. And this is kind of a live staple for the band, right up to the present day. It features quite a simple guitar figure that occasionally slides, up and down the fretboard while this tick-tock bass line, continues a dead straight line trajectory all the way through the song. Yeah, all those elements of this period of Wire are there. The electronics, the samples, Bruce Gilbert's guitar, rising and falling in little kind of patches, interjecting, pushing into the song. Yeah, it's a very cool, clear, kind of calm, almost a mantra-like song, this one. And at number 19, I've got Over Theirs. Yeah, this is my pick from what is on the surface quite an odd, quite an outlier release of the period, which is the album It's Beginning to and Back Again, or as it was shortened to, IBTABA. Yeah, a very odd kind of hybrid recording. But it's partly from some live cuts from a gig they played at the Metro in Chicago, but then overdubbed later in the studio with extra guitar and bass and synths. Yeah, on paper you can't see how it would work, but it just does. And they play some tracks here from the Ideal Copy and the Bell as a Cup period, which just give them a much kind of bolder, edgier, more muscular kind of vibe. Yeah, and this is the take of Over Theirs, originally from the Ideal Copy. I think it's a far better version. It goes on for 9+ minutes, very menacing. Yeah, I just think it improves on it in every way. Yeah, this album, an odd one, but it's long been a favourite of mine from this period. It really highlights how the band hadn't lapsed into this kind of total studio project territory that a lot of bands can easily fall into the trap of. They were still a very kind of exciting, very unexpected, very unpredictable live act. And finally, at number 20, the last entry on this primer list, I've got So and Slow It Grows. I'm referring here to the 12-inch single version, not the kind of opening album cut from their album, The First Letter. So yeah, this is circa 91, 92. The band by this point had lost Robert Gotobed, their drummer, and were operating as a three-piece using the name Wire. That's W-I-R, but without the E. Yeah, and all the electronic production, the studio techniques, all that stuff that the band had leaned into heavily after A Bell as a Cup, had always had them using programmed drums. And up to a point, Robert went along with that. He did most of the drum programming, but ongoing disillusionment with his role in the band led to him leaving and giving rise to this, this three-piece version of Wire. I think the club music scene, the electronic, the dance, the trance, the house music sounds of the turn of the 90s, had been a bit of an inspiration to the band. They were always forward-looking, not really interested in recreating the same thing twice, and utterly disinterested in musicianship. So, it ticked all of their boxes. And So and Slow It Grows shows why finally kind of, submitting themselves fully to electronic music production. I think the album it comes from, First Letter, I think it's a bit flat. It's a bit lackluster, but this track is an absolutely perfect melding of the kind of the spooky wire guitar textures with that kind of blissed out 90s dance edge. Yeah, Graham and Colin trade these very smooth kind of vocal hits in this one, and they dovetail together so well. So that's it for part one of this primer. We will be returning with part two quite shortly. But just to briefly, talk about some omissions from this list. Yeah, that initial 3-album run, 77 to 79, it's literally one of the greatest creative runs of the entire punk and post-punk era. It was very difficult choosing, just the tracks I wanted from there. I would say if you're new to the band, the On Returning compilation is a very good summation, but there are so many other tracks I could have had. Sand in My Joints, Mannequin, Map Reference, The 15th, Mercy, Heartbeat, Field Day for the Sundays, the title track of Pink Flag. Yeah, the one I did consciously omit was I Am the Fly. It's a fan favourite for many, but the band absolutely hate it. So for that reason, I've left it out. Yeah, the whole kind of football chant chorus aspect of it really grates with Colin nowadays. Yeah, and if I'm being honest, it's never been one of my favourites either. Yeah, that Drill album aside, I've also managed to completely overlook their 1990 album Manscape here. This would be the one that kind of precipitated Robert Gotobed's departure on drums. In all honesty, it is pretty patchy, and the production does kind of not do the songs any favours, but there are a few good songs on here. I have a soft spot for some of these. Torture is very good. Patterns of Behaviour, Other Moments. These three would all be worth a listen. And just to throw in a little extra at the end, my deep cut, if you like, yeah, I would choose Our Swimmer from 1981. This is a post-154 single that basically sat and released for a couple of years between 79 and 81. Yeah, it's a great track with a kind of a lightness that I think is slightly at odds with 154, but this very kind of cool repetitive layering going on that builds beautifully. Yeah, I would think of this one as kind of, it's like the I Am the Fly, that it's still okay to like. Yeah, and that's it. Just another reminder, I do have that Dot Dash story video if you're interested. I had a lot of fun making that one. If you like this video, then yeah, please do show your appreciation in the normal way. It does help to get the video out to other people. And yeah, always happy, of course, to interact with you below the line with your comments. Okay, that's all from me for now. Take care and bye for now.